Hi guys, I'm Chris,
And I'm Mike.
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, a Mitch podcast. What's new this week, Mike?
Hey, not much. I'm glad this morning, though, we were able to get a golf date on the calendar now that spring is upon us.
Spring has sprung, baby. We're ready to go, ready to golf.
Yes. Got a little wedding to go to. We'll both be there. Gonna take the golf clubs. I don't think we'll have time to take the microphones, but maybe we'll do a little rap on rap from the golf course for our patrons.
Got to. We haven't done one in a long time, so.
Yeah, they deserve it.
It'll be a little preview for when you're going to come play a couple rounds this summer with me up at Penn National.
Yeah, that was cool. Thanks for inviting me to the family trip, the Furmans and the Hughes, Pennsylvania golf outing, and I'm included. I feel honored.
It's a blast. It's a lot of drinking, a lot of golf.
I've heard about this for you from years, so I'm glad I can finally imbibe.
Yes. Also, since we last potted, we officially announced our season 2, and we're getting some good feedback, man, including from Brad Thor himself. He said he's pumped and ready to go.
Loved seeing that. Awesome of him to chime in on the Instagram story. And I'm sure he'll be present on social media. And maybe we'll get a date around Rising Tiger when that comes out to have him on season 2 of No Limits, the Thriller podcast.
Can't wait. I'm done with lines, so we got to talk about that soon. Just excited to get back into books, man. I mean, but I also like doing these episodes. I like them both, but
right.
It's excited to start something new.
Oh, speaking of something new, did you see the teaser for the Terminal List?
I was going to bring that up too. That looks sick.
Holy crap!
It's July 1st, right? July 1st.
Mm-hmm. But that teaser, dude, can you imagine when we get a full trailer?
It's gonna be sick.
Did you see the tomahawk in that final scene?
Yes.
Oh, they had to put the Winkler in. That just proves to me they're doing the right things. They're on the right track.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It looks good. Chris Pratt looks good. The little bit we saw, I'm excited.
Yep. Good stuff. All right, well, Chris, what are we covering on today's pod? This is one I know you maybe haven't been looking forward to.
So, we're wrapping up our season 1 here, and we thought it would be only fitting to revisit the very first topic we talked about, and that is term limits. And it's kind of been a running joke of mine. I'm not going to come down, spoiler alert. It's all been a little bit of a bit, me saying that Term Limits is not a good book, just to get a rise. Pretty much just get a rise out of you pulling your chain.
You enjoy that,
but
it's easy to do.
It's very easy. But I thought it would be interesting considering, how much we've morphed from the very beginning. We've now completed all of the Mitch Rapp books. And let's go back to Vince's first book, which, again, doesn't have Mitch Rapp in it. And not only reflect on how we've grown as a pod, but reflect how this book has grown on us maybe now that we have, a bunch more information and, the way we analyze these things. We're not going to do we're not going to go beat by beat like we did the first time around, but we want to hit a few things and just discuss it again with some new light.
Yeah, and who knows if we get some good feedback, if you guys like this idea, maybe this will be the first in a rewind series. We can go back, rewind the tape, and revisit some of the old school Vince Flynn books. The feed when we're in season 2. Stay subscribed. We'll be occasionally adding to this feed when new books come out. Maybe, Chris, down the road, we pick another one to rewind back to and cover a second time.
I just don't want to go back and rewind Executive Power. That's probably my least favorite book.
Let's do Pursuit of Honor next.
Or that one. I'd like to go back and reread Extreme Measures after our last week's talk about Mike Nash. That all the Nash talk really got me hyped for those books. You could just read Nash's parts, through those books.
Listening to our chat about that again, I was like, man, I really want to reread this one. So that's a good idea. That might come down the road. But something else we both did was went back and listened to our term limits episodes. And besides a terrible audio quality,
yeah, I was going to say that.
We were brand new to the podcast game. I was listening and I recalled a lot of the points that we made, agreed with most of them, disagreed with some of them. Things definitely evolved. So this is going to be a good experiment. But something that also came up when I re-listened was we had shouted out our first Twitter follower ever. Let's give a shout out again because Stan R. Mitchell is still with us on social media. You can find Stan at Stan R. Mitchell. He is a Marine and an author. I was able to pick up one of his books, Hill 406, about 2 Marines and this Marine infantry unit in Afghanistan. It was pretty awesome. Definitely made me want to pick up more of his books. So, Stan, we appreciate you. Our first Twitter follower. You got a shout out 100 episodes ago. Thanks for being with us.
You know, this brings me to a point I want to say we should do an NFT of his like first follow or something like that, or we should do an NFT. We should do an NFT of like our favorite mid-trap cover or Vince Flynn covers and see who would buy those.
Dude, I'm pretty deep in the crypto space, so don't get me started on NFTs. Although I'm down right now, I really need this to run back up again.
I need to own an NFT of something, So.
Oh, dude, I got plenty. I'll hook you up.
Nice.
All right, now, you know what else happened close to 100 episodes ago, and something that I've continued to do on the podcast to this day, and that is to share my thoughts on each and every book in the form of a limerick. Was this my first limerick? It might have been.
It might have been. It's either that or then you did one and then you went back and had to make this one. I forget.
Maybe. I don't think we had limericks ready by episode 2, 3, 4.
No, it was something that like happened organically like a couple episodes down the road.
I think when I did it for either Transfer of Power or Third Option, you're right. I had to go back and write this one. So I thought I'd give you a throwback. The Term Limits limerick. A blonde-haired assassin we now love knew which politicians to get rid of. As fat cats in DC play, Coleman makes sure that they pay an adventure previously undreamed of. The first book he self-published, companies considered it rubbish. Rejected for years, he didn't shed any tears. A thriller universe Flynn would establish.
Pretty good for your first one. You've gotten better. You've grown as a poet.
They have evolved. That's correct.
Yeah. All established with rubbish, like that's stretching it there, but I'll allow it.
I break the rules. My rhyming doesn't always work out. I'm going to call it free verse limericks.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, Mike, do you want to share with the listeners another little tidbit that we sort of had talked about maybe doing this as an episode, but I don't know. After trying to listen to one of these, I was like, no, we can't do this. Maybe enlighten the listeners on what you did to prepare for this pod.
I guess an apologies in order, or a mea culpa. I listened to the abridged version. I did it, folks. I did. I call me a hypocrite.
Well, tell them why you had to do it. You're like...
Maybe this is what they were intended for, and if so, I could be a little more understanding of why these things are published. I went back. I said term limits. I read it a bunch. I loved it, but I don't have time for a 14-hour audiobook right now.
Because it's a long book, right?
It's a pretty big book, right? Even on double speed, I was like, I'm not going to have time to get ready. And then I clicked and found a 4-hour audiobook. And I got to admit it was kind of appealing to me to be able to listen to a book
in 2 hours
on double speed in 2 hours. Right. So I think if that's the purpose for you to go back and revisit a book you've already read multiple times, I might get behind this. However,
sorry, I'm going to stop you there. One of the best parts about rereading a book is rereading everything and like picking up on little nuances. Sorry, continue.
No, that's it, dude. Was it fine to help jog my memory on the gist? Sure.
Sure.
Did I really fall back in love with the characters? Not really. Skip maybe came up once or twice. Half of the cool shit he did was not there. Stansfield pops up out of the blue eventually because he plays a big role in the ending of the story. So if you didn't know the characters and how they were established in the universe, it could just seem like they're popping up out of nowhere to serve a plot device, and you very quickly get lost because you're just getting names thrown at you. But at the same time, it was nice that I was able to recap almost the whole book. Key important stuff was not there. And if anybody ever thought it was okay to tell a friend to get into Vince Flynn and they listen to an unabridged or an abridged version, huge disservice, huge no-no, big mistake. But it kind of jogged my memory. So I don't know. I don't like them, but it served a purpose.
The only reason I could see why these things exist, and again, I understand why like abridged versions of, I don't know, like, you know, audiobooks on like self-help or like, not self-help, but like, I don't know, like Guns, Germs, and Steel. If you wanted to listen to like an abridged version of that where
makes sense.
The author probably takes everything, I like that book, by the way, you know, takes his core theses and then cuts it up into smaller chunks. Like, I get that. But a thriller novel that is not that long, the only reason I can think is like people who only listen to audiobooks and are just intimidated by 10 to 16 hour like reads. They just want something quick. That's the only reason I can see. And I guess it serves like some niche audience. I'm really intrigued. I want to talk to David, you know, if he knows like how many abridged versions sell, you know, if he could just give me that number. Is it obviously they keep making these things for every single book. So
do they for every book?
Well, for every single Vince Flynn book, there is.
Really? Okay.
And Brad Thor ones. Because half the time on Overdrive, before we had Scribed, which they don't sponsor a podcast, but I do like Scribed, you know, every now and then I randomly, the library would only have a bridge. And I'd be like, what the hell?
Really? I think that does a huge disservice. And now actually having listened to one, it's a huge disservice if somebody were to pick that up as their first interaction with that author or in that series. I don't like it. I really don't like it.
All right. I mean, not to put you on the spot, but can you say what are like the top 2 or 3 major things that were just missing, cut out?
In terms of specific scenes, the killing of Turnquist, which was that house where McMahon does the investigation and you see how good Skip is.
Right.
Was just totally gone. I will say they kept almost the whole helicopter scene, and that was like really well done. Oh, the biggest one, dude. Speaker Bassett. Do you remember the assassination where they went into
like
the
from
ducks?
a CNN? Yeah. Like he's coming out like of a press conference, right? Not a press conference, but like an interview.
Right, and they set up in this building by sneaking through the metro and going through the ductwork to get up in this building, take the shot, put out the smoke or fire alarm, and then exit the building with the crowd. All gone. 100% gone. The speaker didn't even get assassinated.
Oh, man. Wow. That's just like cutting the plot.
Well, they did all the other assassinations. So Fitzgerald, the opening one, where they drug the dog, all that stuff.
Okay.
They did Olsen's limousine getting blown up, which was actually the inside job by Stu Garrett and Mike Nance.
Right.
Because they had to. Because blowing up Olsen, who was O'Rourke's friend and mentor, almost like an uncle to him, that gets Mike to be more sympathetic to Scott and the assassin. So they kept things like that worked for the plot, but I can't believe they saw the Speaker Bassett scene where Jack Warch, remember, that's when Jack Warch is on the ground, and that's when you see the speaker ignoring the protection detail and saying, like, no, I'm going anyway.
Right.
So that was gone. Yeah, it was a bummer. And then Skip, when Skip came on, he didn't really do much. And so you're like, why am I supposed to love him so much if you didn't get to really see him doing his investigative work?
Yeah, because honestly, probably Term Limits is is where he shines the most. Like he's
Exactly.
brought up and is a player, but like you could tell that Vince loved this character. And I think that's one of the things that has aged the best. If we want to segue into our next sort of, bit here. But yeah, Skip is, we already talked about Skip, but Term Limits is his best book. You really like sort of, this book is interesting how it's like split up into multiple like mini books almost, because Vince decides to focus on the FBI and, Skip's dynamic and his dynamic with his boss. Then you have the whole assassin like plot, and then like you begin to see Vince's like intrigue with Irene and Stansfield, and like how he sets them up to be like these major power players in the game, in the system. And then you have like the politicians, the thing that Vince likes the best. And then I feel like Michael O'Rourke is almost like him. Like do you get that? Like on re-listening to this, I almost feel like he placed himself as that character, like that is him.
Yeah. Michael O'Rourke, such a great character. And I want to put, he was a Marine, so also something we know Vince had an affinity for.
Right.
Getting into politics? Who knows if Vince ever thought you can actually change the system by getting into it and trying to work it from the inside. I think that was maybe an avenue, creating Michael O'Rourke to play with the idea of the good guys on the Capitol Hill. Even though he doesn't want to keep the job, he's about term limits. Not for him. He's going to leave. But he at least tried to make a difference. Or maybe Senator Olson, someone who did have a good head on their shoulders, were for the working class, the middle class, and wanted to fight for them on the Hill. So yeah, I see that. But I'm going to say it ages well in that he was a great invention. I don't think it ages well the fact that he disappears.
Yeah, that's one of my ages the worst, is the fact that he comes back. What is he? Is he in Consent to Kill? A little bit, or he's in one of them.
One. Yeah,
and it's almost like just an homage to like, all right, my readers who read Term Limits, I'm going to bring them back for you, but that's about it, right? I felt like he could have been a interesting character for Rap to sort of play off of, especially he's going to be on the Hill. He's only going to be on the Hill for a little bit, but that character could have gone on to be different things, So,
yeah.
Especially like this deep connection with Scott that he had, and the fact that Scott was the one. So, yeah, you can see that Vince is sort of laying out this world, right? World building. I would love to have also asked him if he already knew he had the idea to do Transfer Power and like had Mitch's backstory before he like came up with this, or like he's making all this and then while he's doing this he realizes, oh, this is where I want to go. You see these little like threads that he places, and obviously he wants to pull and go run with them. Stan and Irene being one of the main players, but yeah, Michael, he just like sort of just leaves it out there. It never pulled on again. Kind of disappointing.
Yeah. Can you imagine if Mitch and Irene had an ally on the Hill that wasn't just somebody they turned? Like eventually they turn Lonsdale. And there's a couple other people, right? That they
Ferris, they blackmail Ferris into like
Ferris.
doing,
Right.
Most of them they just blackmail. Yeah.
Exactly. Can you imagine if they had a friend on a deeper level of like, you can trust him as much as you would a Scott or a Maslick, and he's on the Hill, your eyes and ears, that would have been really cool. And imagine he eventually gets put on like, I don't know, the Senate Intelligence Committee or something. Like,
sure,
somebody convinces him to work in the government, put up with the bullshit, but kind of be that force for good. It would bring a little balance to the committee hearings to have someone with integrity in those committee hearing meetings, instead of it being so black and white. Mitch and CIA good, politicians corrupt and bad. There could have been this middle ground, because I think that's the hero we also want.
Sure.
Yes, we need the heroes who are larger than life, special SEAL, commando, CIA, assassin people. But something that would make the thrillers, I think, more digestible and identifiable to people is a hero which could really exist. Someone who goes to Congress for the right reasons, says and does the right things, and keeps winning because of that. I think it could have worked great.
And I think that's probably why a lot of people really like Irene and Stansfield, because those are the kind of people. I mean, yes, there probably are people that are like Mitch Rapp, but I know there are definitely people that are like Irene, like that.
True.
Maybe they're not directly the director of the CIA, but they work at the CIA. They're, that kind of people. Yeah. Do you think like not Coleman? Do you think O'Rourke could have ever been president? That would have been interesting. Does he seem the kind of guy that would run for president?
But that's the thing. He does not. He even says, "Fuck this, I'm out of Washington." But aren't those the people we all want to see make it in Washington?
In Washington,
Okay, let's say Michael O'Rourke came back 2 or 3 books after this. What or who could have been the one to convince him to run again and try to serve on a committee where he'll actually be listened to, or try to get a leadership position on the Hill where he can actually influence legislation without having to play partisan politics? Like, that could have theoretically happened. It could have been a Stansfield pushing him in that direction. In his dying days, he not only wanted to unleash Mitch and Irene on the world, but Stansfield also wanted to have an effect on the legislative landscape. That would have been kind of a unique dimension.
Right. Yeah.
So,
or Scott. Maybe Scott pushes them to do it.
Maybe the way Scott reformed could have been the way Mike reformed or shaped up. Like, they went different paths. Like, Scott shaped up in order to use his skills as an assassin for the good guys. And Mike could have shaped up to say, I'm going to use my skills as a don't care, just want to do the right thing politician.
All right, so speaking of Scott, I'm going to put him in what's aged the worst.
I'll agree.
In terms of, not like Scott Coleman, the character that we know and love, starting in whenever he shows up again, but the use of Scott as the villain as aged the worst. It's so out of character. It's not him. Maybe that's why I've been pounding this Term Limits is not a good book narrative because that just keeps, and every time I was thinking about it, we were probably talking about Scott in another book, so we're learning more about him, and it's just so out of place. It's so weird, but I like the idea that Vince has come up with this assassin who wants to do this, I don't like someone like the ransom note's kind of weird, and some of the things that they do and how they how they lay out their demands and how the demands don't really make sense, minus the minutia. This idea of having this assassin that's going to impose term limits, wants term limit, never says they want term limits. That's cool, interesting, but that character doesn't have to be Scott Coleman, Yeah. He could have been another friend of Michael O'Rourke's.
Right. I'm going to agree with you. And again,
okay.
I know I'm changing my tune. I'm playing a little bit of different music here, but I tried to rationalize it in my mind for so long. I've said it. Stansfield made such an impact on Scott by forgiving him on that beach where he killed Mike Nance, where Scott just flipped the switch and said, I'll work for this guy. The Scott of today is a very, very different person from the Scott in Term Limits. And characters age, people change, people grow, people evolve. But this is too much. You're right. He's almost come a complete arc that's not a good, a believable arc.
Right.
Now he's this jokester putting his feet up, in the kiddie pool on this op in Africa, counting off the dollars he's making from Nicholas Ward. And how many years earlier, 15, whatever, he's picking off the Speaker of the House because he has a grudge about paying down the national debt.
Right.
It's bizarre.
And so 2 things. One, how many times is it brought up, again, that I think it definitely is brought up. Mitch says something happened in the past. But after that, it's just dropped, never mentioned again that Scott should be in jail. Second, do you think, because it seems that, and we mentioned this a couple episodes ago, Kyle has latched on to Scott as a character that he likes, as opposed to Mike Nash is a character that maybe he didn't like or, didn't connect with, so he sort of wrote him out of his books. Has the way Kyle writes Scott, has that sort of adapted how we think about him? Or did you also see Vince sort of changing him over time?
It's really interesting. I'd have to go back and dig a bit deeper into the late Vince Scott. Like, I can't really remember all that much about Scott in, I guess, The Last Man, though. I can remember because they were there together on that op with Louis Gould.
Right.
So, and Scott was kind of funny, I think, at some points in that scene. He was on the roof, I think, with Louis. I think there were some comedic moments there, so maybe Kyle just picked up that Vince also purposefully molded and shifted Scott and made him this humorous kind of sidekick character, but who can also slit your throat when you're not looking. I don't know. That's a real interesting question. Was this just Scott's destiny because of who he was and becoming older, just what was going to happen anyway? And that's a good question. Although, however you read into that, you go back to Term Limits, and it's just downright strange.
It is. It's hard to. We can say a bunch of things to rationalize it, but it's just downright strange. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's just weird.
It is. You're right. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. On the topic of whether Scott Coleman ages well, though, I will say some of the writing in this book is among Vince's finest. I might say this passage, which is crazy to think was the first chapter, the second or third page Vince ever wrote, just might hold up as one of my all-time favorite Vince passages.
Interesting.
Tell me if you agree with that. Listen to this. He had lost track of the number of people he had killed in the service of his country. He had not intentionally blocked the tally from his mind. It was just something he had never bothered to calculate. Whatever the number was, he held no regrets for the men he had killed. They were honorless, evil psychopaths, killers of innocent civilians. The solitary figure sitting in front of the fire was an assassin of assassins, an exporter of death, trained and funded by the U.S. government. His short blonde hair glowed as he stared deeper and deeper into the flames. The crisp fire eventually turning into a hypnotic blur. Tomorrow, he would kill for the first time on American soil. The times, places, and targets had all been chosen. In less than 24 hours, the course of American politics would be changed forever. That's one of Vince's finest.
That's powerful. No, you're right. No, that's really good. You could tell that there's, like, he's, obviously it's, first time out of the gate, but he's got something there. He's good. He shows potential, so.
Oh, yeah. Assassin of assassins? Exporter of death?
Yeah, that one line is just like, that's fucking awesome.
Those, like, what was that, 6 words might be some of his best words in the whole series, and it's on, like, page 2 of his debut book.
Right. Yeah.
I love that. Even, let's leave Scott out. Let's say this is just some other random character who we don't have as much emotional attachment to now.
Right.
Let's say it's a random character who writes this ransom letter and makes these demands and these phone calls saying, I'll kill more people if you don't. One of the things was ridiculous. One was a 2% tax. You raise taxes to pay down the national debt. None of that makes any sense. And there were a couple of other demands. What else does he say in this letter? Oh, and then Michael O'Rourke's push for the rural electrification project. Okay, I mean, I don't know. Like, does that have any bearing on anything at all? Like, it seems to be a big, huge sticking point of, I guess it's a symbol of pork. Yeah. And he wants to trim the fat and cut the pork. So that one's more a symbolic ask. But the ask of the assassins is just, it is the worst ransom letter I've ever seen.
Well, I just think that, like, Vince maybe went into way too many specifics on, like, saying what Michael, or like a super specific niche thing that he wouldn't vote a bill on, like, and then having these ransom letters, the demands be very highly specific, it's probably like just, early writing, that's just a thing that down the road you wouldn't be as specific. You would be a little bit more, vague or, a little more creative. And I don't know. You could definitely, we talked about this when we first did the pod. Like you could tell it's his first book, there's some learning curve.
That's true. And I think the other thing there that maybe rubbed me the wrong way about how Washington worked was that ransom note all of a sudden led to congressmen and senators immediately questioning, maybe we should meet some of the demands of the assassins. Or maybe the assassin is making a good point here. I don't understand how one seemingly uneducated and semi-illiterate ransom letter all of a sudden gets half the Congress to want to have a debate over whether they should actually legislate that
right.
and put those changes into action.
Right.
They weren't afraid of being assassinated because, as scary as it might be, they're not going to just change their politics and vote differently on a budget bill because of a couple people being assassinated. They might be scared, but it's not honestly going to change how they vote in Congress. Yet all of a sudden, you got half of Washington asking, maybe we should back off the president's budget bill and not vote because the assassin's asking for something reasonable. I felt like I was being duped the way Washington was adjusting to this ransom letter.
It's just unrealistic in terms of how it would actually go down. So,
man, we got to stop talking because I keep wanting to lower my rating the more we go. So we need something good here, and it's almost the perfect time to bring this up. You know what is amazing about this book? End lasts and ages and is thankfully brought back later on. Stu Garrett and his bullshit.
I love when he comes back.
Brilliant.
And then he dies again, or dies like for real this time. Like what book is that? With Agent Rivera.
He's killed in Protect and Defend in the beginning, but he's playing the fool in Act of Treason.
Right. Yes.
How much does it speak to that he's an amazing character that after however many thrillers I have read, Stu Garrett is still probably, he might be number one on just people in thrillers that you love to hate, that you just want to bash and knock their lights out. He's still number one in every thriller book I've ever read. He's just a pest. And I think that speaks to how he was written right off the bat from Vince's, first book.
He's a slime ball. He's a sleazeball. He's a backstabber. He has no spine. Like,
he's everything.
He's also interesting, and
and you could believe it,
right? And that's the thing. It's hyper realistic. So like you could see someone on the Hill being, or in Washington being this guy. So I think that's why it's even more creepy and more you want to read it. I would read a story just about Stu Garrett.
Right, and he's misogynistic, and you could see how real those conversations must be.
Right.
They leave out Anne Moncour, the press secretary, and he berates her, belittles her. Almost everything he does, you're like, it's hyper realistic. That's it. Yeah. For being the worst, he's one of the best things about the book.
I know. One of the other things that's aged the best, is just all the good guys like in this book that continue to show up, throughout their novels. Like we see Irene for the first time, freaking Thomas Stansfield on the beach. Like even though that scene is like freaking crazy, like it's still badass, and obviously we already talked about Skip. Just the fact that we get them again. Isn't also this book where we find out that Stansfield has, this file of all, it just sets him up as like being this looming presence over Washington, and it really shows how powerful he is. And then the legacy he's going to then leave for Kennedy to inherit, and how looming and powerful she will be. And the reason why she's still in office, like today, in the current books. So,
and you can contrast that with Arthur Higgins, who Stansfield took his job,
right?
And Arthur had a grudge because he thought Stansfield, pushed him out as he was rising up the ranks. But it just goes to show that Stansfield one-upped him. He deserved to be pushed out. He was doing shady black ops stuff, which is the same stuff Stansfield would later do, but in a way that is grounded in necessity and not grounded in like narcissism. You know, Arthur Higgins was greenlighting some of these things because, you know, he loved it. He probably got off on it, and he loved the shady, sneaky world of Mike Nance. He's got the, you know, the guy from DOD, you know, in his pocket, and he loved that stuff. Where Stansfield, he just loves America and wants to protect it. So he's doing some of the same shady stuff as Arthur Higgins, but in a way we can all get behind.
Right. Right. Anything else? Age the worst, age the best?
Yeah. Let's just talk action. I think for a first-time thriller writer, the helicopter scene is
awesome,
meticulous.
I think we went like 20, 25 minutes on the pod on that scene. Yeah, that's an awesome scene.
Oh man, between the geography of it and all the locations of DC, even these very niche ones that were done perfectly, the operational side of it, of just how well Seamus and Scott had this planned out, putting transponders, you know, in a media van so that the media can't turn off the feed and that they see which chopper the president's on. The tech specs, Vince definitely was leaning into some Tom Clancy, you know, kind of expertise here. You could tell Vince really wanted to get the details and the specs right on the choppers. Perfectly done scene. Yeah, loved it. What other action is there, though? Now that I come to think of it, the abridged version didn't give us much action. Oh, the hit on Arthur Higgins' house.
Right. That's a
Hackett
big one.
and Strobel, you know, they do some canvassing and take him down and then capture Mike Nance.
Isn't there like a boat scene too where like they have to get away from the house? Like Scott has to, and then they have to like sink the boat, right?
Yep. Because who did they take? That's when they took Arthur Higgins. He had a tracker on him for his security people. And actually the CIA was watching him too because of all the secrets that he had. He was like who's the guy from Last Man and Survivor? He's like a Joe Rickman. The CIA needs to know where that person is and who they're talking to because all the stuff in their head you don't want that on the black market. So yeah, they sink the boat, or they at least sink his clothing in a backpack so that they can't trace where they're taking his body, which is how they get the confession. He basically gives up that he was working with Nance and Garrett.
Right. Oh, and also you mentioned that the bridge dropped it, but the whole, TV tower scene with the killing the Speaker of the House. Yeah. That's
true. That's one of the best action scenes in the book.
Yeah, no, like the action and like based off of that, the research and the geography as a friggin' two DC guys, it's just awesome. Like reading that stuff, I love, especially when you get it right and it's good. Yeah, no, this book is good. This is a good book. It's just when you come full circle and you've now read the whole series and you look back at it, I think it's on the lower end.
I also, because we talked with Chris Howdy a few weeks ago, a couple other people with their debut thrillers have been awesome recently. I read Connor Sullivan's The Sleeping Bear. I feel like debut books now, 2022, are a little different. Maybe it's social media, how quickly word can spread about them, so you really got to nail it. Because if you want that initial jolt of sales and buzz and excitement, you've got to get some of the influencers really digging and pushing your book. So how do you feel Term Limits holds up as a debut book? I don't know. I feel like the bar has been raised, I think, by a lot of recent authors that I'm not sure how this one would hold up in like a modern context. Maybe that's a dumb exercise to do, but it's a good book. It's not a great book, and I feel like you have to come out of the gate swinging.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say that with this because of like the tech has changed, and this book came out in 1997, so like the times have changed, and obviously like, it was probably very prescient to the times when it was written. But I will argue that if you want to think of Transfer of Power as a debut book, that one stands the test of time as a
Much
debut
stronger.
book.
Yeah, definitely much stronger. So I guess it goes without saying, I don't know if I would ever recommend Term Limits to somebody to get them into Vince Flynn.
No, I wouldn't. I would say you should read it, but wait a couple books.
Yeah.
Maybe if you wanted to start with American Assassin, read those two.
Yep.
Go up until maybe Stansfield's Death.
Yep.
And then the end of Third Option.
Yeah, I think you want to read it after definitely American Assassin, Transfer Power, Third Option for sure. Especially Third Option. You might really get some clues filled in about characters like Stansfield and Scott and whatnot.
Scott, yeah, exactly.
But you probably don't want to read Memorial Day and Consent to Kill. I feel like so much is happening with Mitch by then. You want to be just in the arc of Mitch.
Sure.
Where going back to this book would be like, wait, but what happened to all that really deep stuff that's been going on with Mitch lately? Before you get into that, this could be a good one.
Yeah, I'd probably put it in right after the Third Option, right before Separation.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question, and I don't mean to be political about it. How do you think Term Limits fares in a post-January 6th world? Does it ultimately maybe look bad for the Thrillerverse? I mean, just, how sensitive things are now, or even a Trump presidency. Let's change it. How does this book seem after a Trump presidency or a social media America where we're all divided, or a summer of 2020 America? I don't is it right to be reading books about these assassinations?
Killing politicians?
Yeah. I feel like we're just too, one, hypersensitive. We're too diametrically opposed to anybody who disagrees with us. We don't know how to have dialogue anymore. Does this book maybe teach us a lesson about that? Or is it just cannon fodder for one side to blame the other side?
Yeah, that's a tough question. Again, because the time it was written, I don't think it would have been, obviously, they didn't have social media back then. I don't know. It's a work of fiction, so
it is what it is. Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to read it and then use it as your manifesto to go, recreate what Scott Coleman did, then I don't necessarily agree with that. But I don't think that people will do that. So I don't know.
Yeah. It's probably a dumb question because first rule being a historian, don't apply current day standards to analyze or evaluate events of the past. But
right.
It's just interesting,
Do I think this book would have been written the way it was now? Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah, exactly. All right, so with some of that banter out of the way, let's go back to our original rating.
Oh, God.
Are you going to make an adjustment here from your original B, a B on the letter scale, and a 7 on the 1 through 10 scale? How are you feeling about that?
So, I don't know. We were so weird for the first couple books and how we did this rankings, scores, whatever. And I guess this could just be a primer to talk about now what we're going to do next week in terms of it's time. We're going to revisit all the books. Well, not revisit them, but we're going to re-rank all the books, give you our final rankings next week in what will be our last pod for the moment until we get another book. But yeah, just looking at all of our scores, we were really harsh. A B and a 7 don't make sense together. That a 7 should be a C. A C minus, I guess. So I'm not going to change the B. I think it's a B book. Mm-hmm. I will change the 7, and I think it's an 80. It's a solid, B minus, so 82.
Yeah,
right on that fringe.
Yeah.
You also gave it a B plus and gave it a 75. So like that again doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And just we got to shout out Daryl, one of our patrons. Daryl has been helping us out, putting some thought into our new rating system because we need a revised rating system for season 2.
Season 2 is going to have like actual, like, we don't want to get like too, critical about it, but it will have like parameters. Like it'll be on a 5-point scale or like some sort of point scale. We haven't like said that yet. Yeah. And like the books can earn points by hitting certain marks, and like the cover will be a point, like or have a part of whatever.
That. Exactly.
A part of that. Yes.
We'll have more specific rubric and criteria.
A rubric, yes.
Instead of you and I just winging it. So what we're saying is we will try to act like real podcasters and actual people who are good at this. So we'll shape up for you. We'll shape up. So thank you, Daryl. Daryl's definitely thrown us some ideas for season 2 on how to do that better. All right, so B+, I'm keeping that. An A-, just I don't think it's that book. The 7.5 seems a little low. I'm gonna bump that though to. I'm actually gonna go like 8. I don't want to go 8.5. It seems too high, but that would be a B+. Yeah, all right. I'm gonna go around 8.4, 8.5.
8.4. Yeah, we're right about the same. Like
it's not an A+. It's just a cut below. Excuse me. It's not an A-, just a cut below an A-. So that begs the question: where do you think it's gonna fall in the top 5, bottom 5, middle of the pack?
I think it's bottom 5.
Oh, really?
Or it's like just cracked the bottom 5, just outside the bottom 5. It's hard. There's so many good books, man.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah, at some point you gotta put them at the bottom.
It's clearly middle of the pack for me, but I have zero interest in putting it bottom 5. It's not top 5. It's not bottom 5. It might come down to some individual battles, a lot of back and forth, but
I can't wait for next week. It's going to be so fun.
I think it might get a top 10 spot.
Wow. See, that's big.
I think it might.
That's big. Okay.
I really do. I've given lower than a B+ a couple of times, so.
But not that many times. See, that's the thing,
That's true. All right, I think it's a serious contender for top 10. It's really going to be giving a few a run for their money to try to crack that top 10, but I'm not settled on it yet. So,
well, I haven't officially looked at all of the books and thought about it again, so it may be a little bit higher, but right now it's trending below middle of the pack.
No, you're right though, because off the top of my head, you're right. I'm struggling to find what's lower than Pursuit of Honor,
right? So
Executive Power, Total Power. I'm like, I don't know what else I'm going to put in the bottom 5.
See, that's the problem.
Darn, crap. Maybe Executive Separation of Power. No, I like Separation of Power. This is hard. Ooh, man.
We got a lot of work to do. For next week.
Maybe Order to Kill might. But then the Scott scene, the Grisha Scott scene is so damn good. Oh. This is
Red War.
Hard.
Red War.
All right, Red War I'll say maybe is flirting with like spot 15. Yeah. 16, 17. Yeah, that's true. Sorry, guys.
All right. All right, so we got some work to do for next week, but that's going to be a fun episode. I'm excited.
It's kind of bittersweet to say that might be, for the time being, our last Mitch Rap Pod episode. It is what it is. Lions of Lucerne is calling. Like you said, you finished it. I finished it. Polish up my notes. Pull out some quotes. Jot down a limerick. And guys, sometime in the first week or 2 of April, get ready on your favorite podcast player. Search for Season 2, the Scott Harvath Podcast. We'll be dropping that over the next couple of weeks.
Can't wait, Mike. All right, so we need to thank our patrons, our special operator, Sherry F., our special agents, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Please subscribe, rate, and review using your favorite podcasting platform. Find us at thethrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Instagram at MitchRapPod. And as always, just let Mitch be Mitch. Just a disclaimer, this podcast is not affiliated with Vince Flynn, Kyle Mills, or Simon & Schuster, but thank you to them for bringing us the wonderful world of rap. And the music soundtrack is Guerrilla Tactics by Raphael Crooks.